Welcome back to another episode of the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This episode is once again brought to you by our friends over at Galactic Comics and Collectibles at galacticcomicsandcollectibles.com and on 547 Hammond Street in Bangor, Maine, if you're in the Bangor, Maine area. This episode is Joshua Hull, screenwriter and author of Things That Are Horrifying. Joshua is the co-screenwriter of the film Glorious that hit out in 2022, as well as the author of Mouth and Underexposed, the 50 greatest movies never made. His latest book comes out August 26, 2025 from Clash Books called 8114. That is a phenomenally horrific and amazing novel coming out from Josh. So check that out. But before you do, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, all those things. Follow us on all those things. Rate, review, subscribe over at YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. And then you can go to our website, capesandtights.com, for so much more information, reviews, and beyond. This episode is Joshua Hull, screenwriter and author of the new book 8114, hitting shelves in August 2025 from Clash Books. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. It's warming up here. I live in Maine, and it was like negative 17 getting up earlier in the week, last week. And it was like 17 degrees out this morning. So I was like, oh, it's a freaking heat wave right now.
Heat wave. Yeah. Same thing here in Indy, is where it was like -2, -1. And now it's like, I think it's like 20 degrees outside, or out there in flip-flops, just doing my thing.
I was laughing. My grandfather used to send me messages on Facebook Messenger, which obviously says something too of how Facebook has been taken over by older people. But he used to send me messages randomly. He'd just be like, hey, he lives in Florida. He'd be like, it's 80 degrees out and sunny. And I'd be like, yeah, it's cool. It's snowing here. And now I can send him messages and be like, motherfucker, it's snowing there, man.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's a crazy world we live in right now. But yeah, thanks for doing this and taking time out.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
You are a fan of horror in general, I'm guessing. I mean, I'm guessing you don't just write about it. Just,
a little bit.
You're a
Yeah.
How did you
tend to like it?
Yeah. How did you get into it in the first place? I mean, were you a young lad when that happened, or?
Yeah, I was a young lad. My mom introduced me pretty early on. I think Jaws was the first horror movie I saw. I think I was maybe 3 or 4. I think it was one of those just sitting in front of the TV, and she had made dinner or something, and laid dinner out for us on like TV trays, and then put Jaws on, and my mind was fucking blown. I was like,
Yes.
"What is this? What is this thing?" And then it kind of just kept going from there. And then when I was like 7-ish. She introduced me to Halloween, which kind of just changed Jaws was like impactful, but when you're 7 watching Michael Myers, it kind of just blew the entire world open for me. And so it just went up from there, staying with it.
It's crazy. Jaws turns 50 this summer.
Yeah.
That's absolutely insane to me. Like, it's just like thinking about how long it's been since that movie's come out, and still every time I watch that movie, it's still like amazing.
It's amazing. And it's so impactful, and it's so that's the thing about that movie is, and same thing with Halloween, same thing with a lot of Spielberg's work is how it still holds up. Like to the like even thinking about like Duel and how Duel still holds up to this, and it's just like that's how that guy was just the god of cinema, essentially. To be able to still have this impact today, making the films he does today, but still have like a 50-year impact on filmmakers of all kinds.
I got into horror a little later than most people that are into the genre in general. Obviously everybody comes into things differently at different times in their lives, but I just never really was into like, oh, I don't want to be scared. I don't want the lights to be on. It's this whole thing. And so I got into it. I'm 38. I probably got into it about 5 years ago, really like deep.
Oh, wow.
And,
okay.
Yeah, late in life. And so I was able to like experience all these things. I mean, Jaws I saw years ago because to me, Jaws was always like this weird, like, it's a horror movie, but to me it was more a Vacation Gone Wrong or something along those lines. It really wasn't this like Halloween. But I got to experience Halloween, all those movies for the first time as an adult, and it was really kind of cool.
See, I'm super jealous of that because I love the way I grew up. I love that I got to experience all these things as they were coming out. Like I love being able to talk about how I was there for opening night of Scream when it was, like I love all that stuff. But my daughter is 19, and so I've been able to like share all these movies with her as well for the first time, and seeing that excitement, seeing how much she's become a fan. And I'm just like, I am so jealous of her when she gets to experience some of these movies for the first time, because I want to feel that high, that
Yeah.
excitement again. I still get them, with obviously I'm a diehard. I love all the movies,
Yeah.
but I'm just like, there's nothing like experiencing some of these movies for the first time. That feeling and that jaw dropping, like, what is this?
Oh, that is until they're like, this isn't that cool. We're like, God damn
Yeah,
it.
yeah. They're like, Dad, you got shit taste. You got
Yeah.
really bad taste in movies. I'm like, hey,
Look at the special
this was the
effects in this, Dad.
'90s.
This
It was
is
a different
horrible.
time, right? Yeah, it was the '90s.
And it's, I guess, I mean, what's worse when your daughter sees like Glorious, is that worse if she didn't like that than it would be than a movie that you like growing up?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I didn't know how. Obviously, Glorious is a
Yeah.
wild one to just
Yeah.
drop on the family, right? To be like,
Yeah.
okay, so
Yeah.
and so what? So she was, she was still in high school when that movie came out,
Yeah.
and so I think it was for her. It was exciting because it was actually, it was a really big deal for me, but it was
Yeah.
also just a really big. That movie did really well, and so it was exciting to see. But when she, so she went out to the LA premiere with me when it premiered out there, and so she got to experience all. It was a lot of fun. But so she's like, "Ah, this is awesome, this is awesome." But then she'll go to school and she'll be like, "My dad's moving." Like she had to tell her
Yeah.
teachers, I'm going to LA for my dad's premiere." And they're like, "What is the movie about?" And she's like, "We're not gonna talk about
Yeah.
it." Like,
No, no.
so it's like,
Maybe I
yeah,
should
yeah, yeah. We're
watch
not
it.
gonna
Get, figure it out.
right.
Like, no, no,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
no.
yeah. It's a whole thing. You don't want to talk about it. So yeah.
Well, I'll tell you right now, if you didn't ruin rest stop bathrooms for me with that movie, it definitely pushed me over the edge with Nat Cassidy's
Yeah, yeah,
rest
yeah,
stop.
yeah.
So like dude, just using a public bathroom is just not on the docket
It's
anymore
just off the
because of
docket for a lot of people. Yeah, yeah, I feel like at some point these events that are happening that Nat and
yes.
I find ourselves on, we're gonna end up being on a panel about bathrooms one day. It's just in the future.
I
Yeah,
just feel like
I
a
just see
picture
it.
like it being like San Diego Comic Con or something like that, and you guys have like a
Yeah,
set, and the
yeah,
bathroom's
yeah,
just like subway tile, like
yeah,
it's
yep,
just like the whole setup and everything like that. You can
yeah,
take
yeah.
photo opportunities with you guys like giving people swirlies or something like that. Like that, I think it's a thing. I think we should do this. I think
Yeah, I think
is
I
that a
think
new
I think
subgenre? Resteria bathroom horror?
yeah, I don't know. I think we've started something. Yeah, I wonder if it's the same thing with Nat though, where it's still kind of like that's the most text messages I'll get from
Yeah.
random people where they'll be like, "Had to go to the bathroom, saw a rest stop, didn't want to stop, thank
Yeah.
you," and I'll be like, "What? Don't blame me for you shitting your pants or
Yeah.
pissing." Like,
That's
like
there's
it's
two
not
things
my
I'd rather do:
fault. Like,
shit in front of someone else or shit my pants than go
yeah,
into a
like
public bathroom now.
yeah, take your chance with fate in the glory hole. Don't get mad at me. Like,
You just like sponsor like glorious
yeah.
diapers so people don't have to actually go into the bathroom.
I'm just gonna have to do like a photography nonfiction book where it's just me traveling around the country, putting Josh Hall approves of
Yes.
this rest. Like this is safe.
Safe.
Josh
There
Josh
wasn't
declares it a safe zone. Yeah.
you laugh about that, but so I was married and divorced, and my ex-wife, when we got engaged, it was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is years ago, and I downloaded an app that was sponsored by Charmin that was called Sit or Squat. And the
Okay.
app itself was to tell you, and it rated public bathrooms. It told you which ones are there, which ones are open. So, like, if Starbucks has one, it has like their hours. It told you
Okay.
like if you needed to purchase something to use it, and so on and so forth. I thought this thing was phenomenal. Somehow it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
exist anymore. The servers are offline or whatever. But I'm like, this is the thing that people need to know. And now we need to
Yeah.
do it. And now it needs to be sponsored by you and Nat.
Yeah. We
To
need
be
we
like,
can
we're gonna
Shutter
do
on
a
board.
tour.
Shutter does this whole like it's a map on Shutter's website. Yeah.
Yes.
I love it.
I think
I love
it was amazing, but yeah, no. I feel like just like Killer VHS, which you have one coming up, you're gonna have this bathroom horror subgenre
Yeah.
that's like
Yeah.
gonna be a thing. No, I just wanted to. I was like thinking to myself, like every time when I read Rest Stop, I was like, oh my god, this is like ruining it even further than what Glorious did. But yeah,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it,
so
it is
funny.
what it is, and you know what? You're ruining going into houses now too with 814, 8114 too. But no, um, we'll get into that in a second. But so you're a horror fan. You love horror. You love things, obviously, like film in general and so on and so forth.
Yep.
But what transitioned that into writing books about horror or
You know,
in horror?
yeah, it was never part of the plan, really. I never, when I was in elementary school and they, so I don't know if you, we would have these initiatives where they would encourage writing for like they would these little books that you could write in. I don't know if ever all these other schools had them, but
Yeah,
they were real big here in Indiana because Jim Davis was from Muncie, which is about 20 minutes away from me, and so Garfield creator.
yeah,
They really encouraged writing as a youth, and so I would just do those little things. I was a big Goosebumps, so I'd try to write my own little Goosebumps stories, but that was kind of it. I was
yeah,
never gonna be like Ride. Now I was like, I never want to. I love Stephen King, all that stuff, but I was never like I'm going to be an author one day. It was always
yeah,
film. It was always just filmmaking. And then um, 2019 or 2018, the opportunity to write a book happened, just kind of by luck, by accident. I don't even know how to say it, but and that was a nonfiction book called Underexposed, which was about
yeah,
movies. Um, that gave me an experience writing books, and I was like, oh, this is really fun. But the thing about nonfiction is you have to be truth. You have to tell the truth, and and I was like, I really want to write a book now that like kind of connects with my screenwriting and filmmaking. And so I that's really kind of when I started flirting with the idea of, um, this would be a nice way to connect my work and segue into some narrative
hmm
fiction and things like that. And so that's really what once Glorious came out. After that few months after Glorious was really when the opportunity happened, and I was like, okay, I can actually now I can write some books and do both, do screenwriting
yeah.
and writing books. So that's it. Really kind of came by chance, by accident, and now I think I had to stick around for a little while.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would like more. You've already got some. You got one coming out this summer with 8114, and then you also have the new Killer VHS coming out after that. But is it? I don't know. I'm trying to think about like I know a lot of authors, or sorry, yeah, authors that eventually were screenwriters as well. Is it common for someone? I don't know, and you might not be able to answer this, but like, is it common for someone to be a screenwriter and then decide they want to write books as well? I mean, it seems like a. I know they're two different ways, and in that writing is not writing. It's the same thing. It's like if you
Yeah,
decide
yeah, yeah.
to conquer like comic books or graphic novels, it's a completely different way of writing.
Right, right.
Unless you write a book that's, I mean, there's books that are written like screenplays, so it
Yeah,
is
yeah, sure.
that's pretty easy. But what is it harder, easier? Is it? I mean, what's the difference in your mind between screenwriting and writing books?
This is funny because I do. People will kill me because I think screenwriting is so easy, and I say this,
Well, I mean, it's
but I've
easy
been
if you're good at it and you like it. That's probably easy. You know what I mean? Like I know
well. The
you're saying
jury's out
that.
if I'm good at it or not. But
I think you're
you know
good at it. That's all that matters at this podcast right here. I think you're good at it.
yeah, all
Go.
right, hell yeah, hell yeah. But I've been doing it for so long
Yeah.
that I feel like if you've been I've been screenwriting since middle school. Obviously, there's a difference in middle school screenwriting and professional screenwriting, obviously. But I've been studying the format. I've been reading the format since I was in middle school because that's what I always wanted to be. And so at this point in my life, as a 40-something-year-old man, if I'm not good at screenwriting or think that screenwriting is relatively like easy, then
Mhm.
I really chose the wrong path. And so I can say that I think screenwriting is easier because I've been doing it so much
Mhm.
and I've written so many screenplays. But when I started writing Mouth as a my first venture into, fiction, I was like, this is hard. I don't know what I'm doing, and I technically started writing 8114 before Mouth, but
Yeah.
it was just they were hard. It was hard because they're so different formats, so different styles, so different. The voices are different. Everything's different about these forms, and so it was really hard going into Mouth and doing that book and getting those notes from Alex, the editor, and just being like, you can tell you're used to screenwriting because you're bouncing from all over, and you got to remember you got to stick with one. And so it was really hard to do that, but once I got into it, I was like, okay, this is exciting and it's brand new and it's fresh. But then it also made screenwriting fresh again because then I could go back into screenwriting and be like, okay, how do I do this? Oh yeah. And then it was fun. It was like bouncing back and forth and just whatever sandbox I want to play in that day, I
Yep.
get to do that, And so
And I think
yeah,
that's
so
yeah. That's a great answer because I think that there's a lot of people who are multi media writers, like people who write different medias or mediums, I should say. They could pick like a comic book writer who also writes books. It's like, okay, this is good for comics because this is more visual. This is good for film because it's more like motion. There's places for everything, and sometimes there are like you could have written Mouth. I don't know. You could have written Mouth as a screenplay originally, and then decided to adapt it into a book, and make it what it is. I mean, it's based on a film as a filmmaker in it, so that makes like obviously connects with you.
yeah. Well, I think yeah, I think everything that I do, story wise or book wise, is going to involve film
Yeah.
in some form, just because it's a part of my life. There's no, I'm not writing, I'm not going to be writing serious drama books, or very, like I'm not going to be doing, and I think that's just because that's my life. That's 40
Mhm.
years of my life of just loving film, and that's going to come through my characters and that's going to come through the narratives that I do, is just because that's just who I am. It's the same thing
Mhm.
with, comics. It's the same thing with anything that, like anything that I've loved, it's just going to find its way into my work
Yeah.
regardless. And so film just happens to be the thing that has always been there. And I do know that, I know people don't always love the references. I know Stephen Graham Jones gets that a lot with his stuff. And
Yeah.
I have seen some 8114 reviews where they're like, they don't like and I'm just like, well, that's, it, but people
But
talk like this. Like I talk like that in my
yeah.
regular life, much to the dismay of people in my life, probably. But I do talk about movies and film,
Well, you write what you
and
know. You write what you
yeah,
know. That's
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
thing. And so,
exactly.
like, that's one thing I've always pointed out with Stephen King. Is Stephen King, who's technically my neighbor, but not really my neighbor. He has a house a couple miles from me, but not really. He
Oh
doesn't
wow.
live there. That's where he grew up. That's where him and
Oh right,
he
right, right,
raised
right,
Joe
right,
and
right.
on the,
Yep. Okay.
or he lived there when he wrote a bunch of books. But he always writes about author. Always, there's a lot of his book features authors in it. A lot of
Right.
authors' books feature authors
Right.
in it. There's
Right.
the number of times you read a book that's like this person was going to a remote cabin to write a book. I'm like,
To
what the
right.
hell?
Yeah.
I don't want to like.
Yeah.
It's like a seventh amendment. Is he writing a book about someone writing a book? It's like this is how it's
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's true. You write what you know, and so like I mean, your friend of the podcast, Brian McCauley, same thing. He
Yep.
does a lot of his
Yep.
books have to do with
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
He's a screenwriter as well, and
Another
so
screen. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so like you write what you know, and I understand that. And yes, you're right. By purposely not writing around film or referencing those things is denying what you would talk about in real
Yeah.
life. Like if
And
you have
it's trying
conversations
like
with people like
yeah.
that, then you're denying it instead of just
You
writing it.
and it's like, you're trying to squeeze in, like, no, right, what you're passionate, and
Yeah,
Brian's a great example
yeah,
of that, where he is like, the reason why he started writing Curse of the Reaper was because he tried to get it set up as a movie.
yeah,
And like it's the whole thing of like, okay, well, and that's going to seep into his work as well.
hmm
And it's just, it's just funny because I'm like, yeah, you should be able to write about what you know and write about what you love about,
yeah,
and or love, and then, if people don't like it, they don't like it, and that's fine, and I'm okay with that. I get it. I do totally get it, but I do think it's a weird criticism sometimes because I'm just like, what? Just I would much rather spend time writing and celebrating
yeah,
something, or like even referencing something that maybe, and I know this is what Steven does too, is like reference a movie that maybe somebody
yeah,
doesn't know about, and so
yeah,
they go look it up, and like that's the whole part of writing books and sharing work with an audience, is to maybe give them something that they didn't
yeah.
know, or yeah.
Have you seen Y2K?
I have I
So,
loved it.
to me too. And the funny thing is, I was explaining this to a friend of mine the other day about how there's way too many Y2K or like your early 2000s 99 references in it, but
Yeah.
so amazingly, I like it so amazing. Like it's so perfect in my opinion because it's like over the top, but it's like it's trying to push home on purpose what era this is happening at.
Yeah.
And like if someone just a generic person who maybe didn't grow up and actually lived through
Right.
Y2K, like someone
Right.
who was born in
Right.
early 2000s who were like I wasn't even alive yet or late 90s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, or someone who yeah, that or didn't care or wasn't like really around things like that, like the opening scene about instant messenger burning a CD
Oh
away
yeah. Oh yeah.
messages,
Yeah.
and then it just went on from there. Fred Durst, but like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
all of that hit so close to home for me because I
Yep.
lived
Yep.
through it that I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I
Same thing.
love
Yeah.
all these references. Like you can't, like you almost didn't
Yeah.
do enough, even though someone else, like I said, those anybody who's 18, 19 years old, they weren't around when this was
Right.
happening, and
Right.
so they're like, well, this is so over the top. Like no, it was actually perfect, honestly.
But you know what's funny is I watched it with my girlfriend and my
Yeah.
daughter. And my daughter again, she's only 19, right? So you know, but I was a senior. I graduated in 2000, right? So
Yeah.
that was like Y2K was
Yeah.
like shit. Like it was, and for better or worse, I mean, for a while there, Fred Durst was also my shit, right? Like just like he was everybody. Like,
I also don't think that would have worked as well right now if he wasn't popular right now.
no,
If Fred
yeah, you're
Durst
right.
wasn't touring with Limp Bizkit right now, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
think it would
you're
have hit
right.
as hard. But like to
You're
me, it was
right.
just really funny. I'm like, out of nowhere, I was just like, holy shit, Fred Durst is in this
Yeah,
movie.
yeah. No, it was great. And but you know, my daughter for she really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
And you know, part of that is because she did have to, you know, when Limp Bizkit did Lollapalooza a few years
yeah,
ago and it was live when they were streaming it live,
yeah.
like we went over to some of my friend's house
yeah.
and she was stuck there watching
Watch it.
us, like me and my friend Elise just fucking rock out, like living that life again and being excited, like, oh my God, we were like, this was life was so crazy
But see, that's
in the
part of your
year
life.
2000, right? Like,
So,
but
so
that's a
if you were to
core
write that movie or write a
memory.
book about it, you would
Yeah,
have put this
exactly.
in it, and so it makes so
And
much
that's,
sense to do
yeah.
that. And by purposely avoiding it, it's the same, thing I've seen recently where someone was like, "Oh, you can't do that because that person's close to you, so you can't help them out." So because I'm close to this person, I can't help them out with something.
Right,
Like it's this
right,
weird,
right.
like, how do you pick and choose to do things? And I think that the best novels and best books or best books and best movies that you're going to write are something that you relate to. So obviously, I don't know how close a relation getting caught in a bathroom and having something like glorious
Oh
is
yeah,
writing what
yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
all the time.
but
That was every weekend of my life. Like I was like, well, shit,
but
I
I
should
see that.
probably
But
just
so
write this
so
as a movie.
so Mouth, though, if you think about your novels, so you have Mouth, which obviously is with the filmmaker, and then you have 8114, which is based on a child at home. So like, it's not your child actual, like this is not a nonfiction book, a story about your childhood in this home. But there's you write about it, and you write about it. I think in your acknowledgments or your notes at the end, it's very 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 much influential into this writing of this book. Was that
Yeah,
a story
yeah.
you've always wanted to tell? Is this something that like it's
No,
been like percolated, or just like later on in life you decided you want to do
no.
this?
I'll tell you, you know, growing up in that house, because that 8114 is based on the house I grew up in. It's
Hmm.
set in the house I grew up in, and set in the town I grew up in and still live in. It's based on a lot of the things in that book are real. A lot of those places in that book are real. A lot of the stories in that book are real. Um, but that was a place that was just as spooky and terrifying as it is in the book. And so when I left that house, I think I think it was 19 when I moved out
Mhm.
of that house. That was kind of it. That was always the end of that 8114 journey for me, and it stayed that way and for years and years and years until 2022 when I had a nightmare completely out of the blue that my one of my old best friends, Eric, killed himself in that house. And I woke up and I was like, that was terrifying. And I wrote it down just because I always write down some of my dreams if they're something like that, just because like that was intense. And I thought about it for the rest of the day, and then I thought about it more, and I just kind of formulated a story around it that I thought was really cool. And then I pitched it to my brother Tom, who reads a lot of my stuff. He lived in that house as well, and this is a great idea for a novel. And at the time, it was going to be so much more. It was going to be it's going to be the story that it is right now, but it was also going to feature an entire middle section that I would compare to The Fisherman.
Mhm.
Where it was going to have the whole middle section was going to be the history of Pendleton and how everything kind of ties to what was happening. And so that was in the original outline, original blueprint for the book. And then once I got into writing it, I was like, oh, that's going to slow it down. It's going to take away. This is Paul's story. And so, yeah, it just kind of came about as an accident. I never planned on writing this book until I had that nightmare. And then I was like, that was terrifying. And so that's really where the book came from. And so a lot of reality, a lot of my real life does spill into the pages of the book.
Was it hard to like not like fully be really like was it hard or easier to add in some of the fictional parts of it?
Well, it depends on who you ask. What's the like fictional? I mean, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by what's
How
real in
much
this
is
book
real?
and what's
Yeah, yeah.
actually not real. You know, there's there.
I think you just leave it at that. I don't even think you should be even like saying like just be very ambiguous about what's real and what's not real and
Yeah.
let people actually
Well,
guess it would know.
no, I think, and I think, yeah, that's true. But I think, there's people that, Paul Early is he's definitely a version of myself, right? Like, there's definitely Paul is very much in my voice, my sense of humor, my kind of the way I look at things. Not other parts of Paul Early, not
Yeah,
other parts of the
yeah,
story, but
yeah,
I had to very early on decide because I come from a big family. I have siblings. I have many
yeah,
siblings, and so it was very much. Do I include the siblings in the book, or do I make Paul a single child in this house? And there's a version of this book again with like that big middle section that could have made this book bigger than it is. And then if you think about you're writing for six other siblings and they're like that and they all have their own story, that's expansive as hell. That's making that's a Stephen King book at that point,
yeah.
where it's like and so I had to decide early on if I was going to go that route or just go single child route. And after some talks and conversations, I decided to go the single child route because I just thought it made more sense for the story I was telling and more sense for the house,
Yeah.
this version of this house, right? And not and this wasn't I wasn't telling the whole family story. I was telling Paul Early's story, and so
Yeah.
that was a very big decision that I had to decide what I was going to leave out, and I've had to explain that with a lot of people. I had to explain it with my family a lot. I had to, my mom was reading the book, and I was just like, "It's not you." I have to keep hammering it home. This is not you. There's nods and references, but I was like, it's not, and so things
Yeah.
like that where, I do think because it is such a personal story, there are going to be people that are like, is this me? And I'll be like, yeah, it's probably you, but like it's
It's not
versions of
actually you.
you
Yes.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
So it just like, this is a version of me, but it's not me, it's like,
Yes. Yeah.
so yeah, yeah.
I also love the avenue of a podcaster. So Paul's a podcaster and that is a lot. That's a very common trope in thrillers and like mystery stuff. Like
Hmm.
the turns home because there's a murder in your town and da
Yeah,
da da
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing. It's very common. In horror, it's not seen as much, which is really cool because honestly, there's a lot of horror podcasts. There's a lot of true crime that could be considered horror in that sense too. So, as a podcaster myself,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
connected with that in a way, which was really cool. And then, the debate on what you podcast about, like like if something big happens but it's controversial, do I get on here and spout off about it? Do I not? Do I
Right,
avoid
right,
it? So on and
right,
so forth.
right.
And obviously Paul deals with that a little bit too. Like I've
Yeah,
got this thing that I really want to talk about. It will kill
yeah,
it on the ratings, and people will listen to this thing, but
yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of pissing some people off. That was a cool thing. I think in that sense
Thank
that
you.
adding that podcaster in there was really cool. Does that? I mean, you don't podcast, do you?
I do not know. It was funny because I was like, when people are like, why'd you make it a podcaster? I'll be like, well, it made sense for the story. But if you think about the other side of this, I was writing this while I was promoting Glorious in Mouth. So I was doing a
Mm,
lot of podcasts. And I just think, you know, I think it's a fascinating art form. And I
yeah,
think it is, becoming, depending on what you choose to listen to, I think
yeah,
it is becoming the most reliable news source
yeah,
and has been, and I think it's the most reliable source of connection for fandoms all kind. And I think it's the most reliable source for all of these people to connect and form communities. And I thought about what if you use that to your advantage, that
mm,
the kind of person that would use that to their advantage is a person that would ultimately also put themselves in a situation to just keep screwing up
Yeah.
and do that again. Because once you're in that mind state of I'm going to choose to be this controversial person, I'm going to stay being that person. Even when I'm facing the greatest tragedy that I've had to deal with head on, and it's going to open this doors to terrible things. And that's
Hmm.
what I think that there's I just think it's the best way to tell this story. And so, and I just think, I really just enjoy podcasts and enjoy podcasters. I love coming on shows.
Yeah.
But I think, what's the other option? He's a
Yeah.
documentarian, and it's like that just kind of
And that
treads
wouldn't
back
connect with as many
into,
people, I don't think. I think it connects with people
yeah,
who
yeah, yeah.
are heavily into documentaries, but like how big of a crossover is that in your genre?
Right.
Like,
You're not watching a documentary like every week, right? Like you're
yes,
listening to a podcast like
yes, yeah,
multiple times. And so I think that was, there's a version of 8114 that is a document
yeah,
that he's and there's maybe that's the movie version of
yes,
this story, is because, podcasts maybe don't translate as well cinematically. But
yeah.
that was the reason why I went with the podcast.
That makes sense. I'm going to start telling people that I was the influence
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
good
yeah, yeah,
podcast.
yeah,
I'll just
yeah.
people
Do it,
won't
do it,
know, but I'll just
do it. Yeah,
I'll tell you
yeah.
right now.
We'll never admit it was a backdoor deal.
Yes.
Yeah.
The funny thing is so I saw Glorious, had no freaking clue who you were. And I'll just admit that. It was absolutely phenomenal. I watch a lot of
That's
Shutter
okay. That's
stuff.
99.5% of the entire world. That other point
Yeah,
5 is
yeah.
just like my daughter and my
Yeah.
girlfriend and my mom and
And
my
this
family.
one really obsessed weird person on the internet. No.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, this one guy that keeps trying to get me to go to a
Yeah,
bathroom with him. It's
yeah,
weird.
exactly. Yeah. Okay, Nat.
Yeah, I'm
No.
like Matt Gassy.
No, but the shutter, the tune, the dun, dun, that stuff, like to me is just like gives me goosebumps before a movie even
Yep,
starts. So there's that.
yep, yep.
But I regularly, daily check NetGalley because the books
Okay.
that are coming out, I want to know, and so there's a lot of books that I know I want to read. Like there's just I have a list.
Mm-hmm,
I put a list out at the end of the year of like these books I'm looking forward to, or I've read some of
mm-hmm,
them, so on and so forth,
mm-hmm.
and then there's the daily check of just like what books have been added. So like you see, and obviously, you're judging a book by its cover, but by
Yep,
trade, I'm a
yep.
graphic designer, so I always judge things by their
Yeah,
design.
yeah.
And so the 81 or 14, first of all, absolutely love the shortness of most of your titles,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
like to
yeah.
me, there's too many people out there. I mean, we're having Matthew Rosenberg, comic book writer, on in a couple weeks, and all of his titles for comic books are like sentences, and I'm always
Yeah,
like, dude, you
yeah, yeah,
suck when you're trying to like write something or do something like that's such a horrible thing. Um, and
the
then
Eric LaRocca title, like
yes,
it's like
exactly.
yeah,
Yes. Like,
yeah,
come
yeah,
on, man.
yeah.
Like,
He's
it's
got
hell.
the best
Yeah,
title.
they're amazing, but it's just like, dude, I come on. So that was
Yeah.
one. The cover itself was just like, oh, I've got to do this, and so I added to my wish list. And one of the reasons why I didn't immediately was just like submit for request or whatever, was that it comes out in August, and I was like, Jesus,
Yeah,
man, like this is
yeah,
out
yeah,
for a long time.
yep,
And so I was like, it
yep,
gives me a little time trying to figure my schedule out because obviously I can't read everything
yep,
and so on and
yep.
so forth. And then all of a sudden, I know where I just felt like, you know what, I want to do this, and I requested it, and I got accepted, and I read it. 218 pages ish is what the book is. I'll tell you right now, that's an approachable length for anybody. I think there's a lot of people out there who don't read Stephen King because of the length of some of his novels.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
I think that's huge on that sense. But also the cover, I think also 218 pages allows it to be like a slower, like a lower price bracket too for people. So that price is approachable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and so, but all of that was like, okay, I need to read this. And then I freaking read it and I was like, okay, this is amazing. And that's when I connected the dots between
Oh,
you writing
gotcha,
as
gotcha.
glorious and everything else.
That's
So I was like,
awesome.
oh, this is pretty awesome. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. And I'm so glad I read it. What's cool about it too is I feel like I read it so early before the release date that I feel like I also will not force myself to, but I'll just stumble into reading it again between
Yeah.
now and then. But I'll have to make me get a PDF from you because it will expire on Galley probably in April or
Oh
something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
we'll have to
Yeah,
talk
you
about
know
that.
what's
Yeah.
funny is I think the read for it's like you said where it hit NetGalley so early. Like,
Yeah.
we did start sending arcs out, like, but I love that because Mouth was such a different experience with arcs where I think we started sending arcs out maybe like a month before
Yeah.
the book before Mouth came out. And so it was cool. It was like real brief, boom, boom, boom. But this has been a lot of fun because you're seeing this real time sort of um reaction to it from a
Yeah.
lot of reviewers, a lot of that's fun. That's and you're gonna and you are getting to see like the frustration of people being like, oh, I want to oh shit, it's not out
Yeah.
until August,
Yes.
which is I get it. It's a long time, but I genuinely I love seeing the reaction to it. I love seeing I don't know how it's getting all the buzz
Yeah.
that it's been getting on all these lists, which is great. I'm appreciative, but it's been fun to see it from both sides of like,
Yeah.
okay, the brief arc window and now this long arc window, which is giving a lot of people a lot of time to digest and ask questions, and it's been a lot of fun to just have these open. Now it sucks for like me personally because I can't really not that I respond to a lot of reviews and
Yeah.
stuff, but there's some that I'm like I wanna like talk about this publicly and like be like this is what, but I can't say it because I'm
Yeah.
like it's like the book's so far away,
Yeah.
but and I can't really spoil it. It's like we talked about. You can't really give things away, but I think the rereadability of it for people who read it, like you read this
Yeah.
early and then maybe you revisit it. It's gonna. I think other things are gonna hit maybe that weren't so clear. Hopefully, I'm hopeful that's how it works.
And I'll be completely honest with you. There's a possibility I don't reread it again ever, but that's just that's just how
Yeah,
the
me,
world
me,
works. I'm
me
just
too. Right
saying,
there
like,
with you. Right there with you.
I'm probably more apt to put Glorious on again, even though it would give me like way more chills or like gross me out and make me not want to use a bathroom again. But no,
Yeah.
the it's just there's so much stuff out there. But I think that's a huge thing, and I think the people that so obviously reviews online are horrible sometimes, sometimes great, sometimes
Yeah.
people
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's a
Yep.
whole mixed bag thing. But as of right now, there's 110 Goodreads ratings,
Mm-hmm.
and I just looked
Mm-hmm.
that up right now. That's a lot for this far out in advance. But those are the
Mm-hmm.
people who really wanted to read it, in my opinion. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like those are those. So even if they gave a 1 star because they didn't like it or whatever it
Yeah.
might
Yeah.
be,
Yeah. Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
really wanting to read this book
Right.
that early, and I think that's a cool thing. I think that's one of those. I don't know. I just feel like there are a lot of big authors. Like Stephen King, I don't think sends out arcs anymore at all. But like if they
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if they are, you're like, okay, I'm gonna read them, drop everything I'm reading to read that. But
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
to actually just carve out some time this early to read it, I feel like that's a good sign in my opinion. Whether it's a good review or a bad
Yeah.
review, I think it's pretty cool that someone was that interested in reading it that early.
Yeah. I agree. And what's funny is I was kind of warned, not warned, warned's a bad word. Um, given they gave me a heads up that maybe
Yeah,
NetGalley isn't always so
yeah,
friendly to, and I've seen a few others say that, like,
yeah,
but genuinely, it's been really nice.
yeah,
There's some negative ones on there, but I'm really happy with the response on NetGalley, and I know it's a lot of the same crossover on the Goodreads, it's a lot of the
yeah.
same things.
Well,
But I just really think, again, I like even if it's a negative review. Thanks for reading the book. I love
yeah,
it. Like it's always great, and it's this was not a position I was in 2 years ago.
mhm.
I'm sitting here talking about two books now that are out that have positive and negative reviews, and that's all I can think about is how cool it is that people are just taking the time out with so much shit out there to
Yeah.
read these weird little things or whatever.
I think some of the reviews that you get in. So, like, do you get access? Does this Clash send you those from NetGalley or anything like that, or is that just something like? Because I know NetGalley, for example, it's like it's pretty much you're not anonymous, but like it's not publicly shown unless a publisher decides to feature your review, and usually
Yeah,
someone's only going to feature reviews that are like they're not going to be like,
I'm on that
okay,
galley though.
okay,
Like so I get
okay.
stuff
I
on
just
there
didn't know
too.
because like
So
that
I
is like
get
a
to
faceless
see.
thing. So at least Goodreads is like you're putting it to your
Yeah.
profile. So like
Yeah.
someone might be like judging you and seeing you and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
seeing all your other reviews. Whereas NetGalley, it's like a thing you send it in and then like the people who have access to see those things
Yes.
see it unless they decide like the publisher whoever could feature the review, and then those of us who want to go in there and see it can go see the featured reviews. And like
Right.
I'm guessing Clash doesn't go in there and be like, oh, this is a 1 star review, let's put this on there. Like I'm guessing we're not going to see those those negative
I don't know how
reviews.
they do it, but I see every I know
Okay.
there are some authors that don't pay attention to reviews
Yeah.
whatsoever. I genuinely like to see everything that's kind of being said. That's not that's a weird pivot from like my filmmaking stuff because
Yeah.
like I used to be like, oh no, people, but with these, I really do. I genuinely am curious about what everybody thinks,
Yeah.
and it's just fun to see the wide variety of stuff,
I
especially for this
felt
one.
yeah, I mean I feel like it's weird too reviewing movies and reviewing books are like a different thing. It's a lot easier for me to throw on an hour and 20-minute movie and
Yeah,
commit
yeah,
an hour and
yep,
20 minutes
yep,
than it would be to
yep,
commit a couple of weeks to reading a book, depending on your speed of reading.
yep,
You
yep.
really can't do anything else but read the book.
But
Especially,
focus on the
I
book.
mean,
Yep,
like I read a lot of audiobooks too, but like that I can wash the dishes, I can do
yep,
something while I'm
yep,
doing it.
yep.
Whereas like reading a advanced copy, it's you're reading text, so you have to sit
Yeah,
down
yeah,
and
yeah,
read it.
yeah. You got to
And so
sit
that's
down and
committing to
focus.
it. So
Yep.
like and that's why I understand why someone might not finish it if they didn't like it because they're like I only got this finite number of time and all this other stuff. But I'm also to the point where I'm like it's 218 pages. Like it's not that long that you can't just like
Yeah,
push
yeah,
through
yeah,
it
yeah.
because it things I've read so many books. I'm reading The Outsider by Stephen King right now, and I'm 50% through it, and it was 50% through it when Holly Gibney. The only reason I'm reading it is because of Holly Gibney because the new book features
Yeah,
her as
yeah,
well. And I'm like, it's 50% through before you actually Holly even is featured in there. And if I just got
yeah,
pissed off
yeah,
and didn't finish it, then I wouldn't get to the point where she's actually in it towards the end. So like, I feel like reading something is not it's not that difficult unless it's like a thousand
yeah.
page
And I
book.
think
Like,
that is the thing about this is 8114. It kind of
yeah,
dives right in. Like
yeah, hmm
you're it's not there's not 100-page setup here. It's like there might be like a like a 20-page set,
hmm
not even 20-page. I think there's like a 5-page setup, and
yeah,
then you're in it. So yeah, I that's also my movie stuff is I that's the screenwriting aspect where I want to get in as late as possible and go from there. I don't
yeah.
want to do the big build up thing. But I also don't know if I'll ever. I don't like. I thought when I turned in 8114, I thought it was longer than it was, and I was like, oh, it's only 200 and so. And I was like, damn, I thought that was like a 300-page book, and I was like, I'll never be able to do one of those because I was just so
Well, I feel
oh,
like
this
the
is
same way on
hard.
the other side. It's like every once in a while, I'll like get an advanced copy that's like 400 pages long, and
Yeah,
I'll be cranking along, reading it on my phone, just like in bed or whatever. And I'm like,
yeah,
sweet. And I'll look down and I'm like, I've read 5 pages. The fuck? I
yeah,
thought I was
yeah,
like
yeah,
40
yeah,
pages
yeah.
into this book. I'm
Yep,
like, this is
yep.
gonna take forever to read.
Yeah, 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 yep. That's it.
But
That's definitely my yeah. In my
well, I'm
writing note,
just
I'll be like, I'm
yeah,
doing so good, and then it's like 2 paragraphs. I'm like, shit.
yeah. I think it is what it is. So you write screenplays. You obviously
Yep.
are an author. We're talking about that here. And 8114 comes out in August, which is amazing. Pre-order that too. We'll continue talking about
Yes,
that here in a
please.
second. But
Yes, please.
I wanted to say is like so. I hate the word easiest because it's not easier. Everything is hard. If you're good at it, then again, some things come
Yeah,
easier than not. But do you
yeah.
think that writing something like Mouth in 8114 it's easier to get in front of eyes because it's not a movie? Like it takes a lot more effort and
That's a
work
good.
and
That yeah.
like meetings and budgets and all this stuff to get a movie made
Yeah, I
than
will.
a book.
Yeah, yeah. I will say. Okay, yeah. So
Yes,
easiest is the wrong term, but I will say there are. And again, this is going to sound negative.
I feel
It's
like
not
there's less
negative.
obstacles. I think there's less
There's less
people you have to.
voices. There's
Yes,
less. There's
yes.
less. So for Mouth, there was three of us, right?
hmm
It was, and I had essentially final cut. Like I had to listen
Yeah.
to anything they said. I could have put the book out how I wrote it. But I'm very collaborative, so obviously as you should be is listen to
Yeah.
every note and listen and think about it. But so yeah, I had it was Alex, Matt, and myself on Mouth, and that was it. And then on 8114, it was kind of the same thing where there's a couple, there's like three of us, four of us that have input on it, and I think if this was film versions of these or just film in general, for example, and again, not a negative thing, but
Yeah.
like Rebecca and I have been trying to make a movie since Glorious came out. Like before Glorious came out, we were trying to set up our next movie. That came out in August 22. And that is finally about to start shooting in March, I think. And that's a movie that had a script done before Glorious came out that has had to go through all of these things,
Yeah.
and jump over all these, and that's not a bad thing. That's just how there's so many people and so many levels of things that have to be okayed and approved and looked at when you're
Mhm.
doing films, and that's the exciting part because it's such you're inviting so many voices into the process of a film, right? Like, and that's exciting, and there's so many people that are going to be a part of this journey, but sometimes get the opportunity to just tell the story and then put it out, and like, and that's the great thing about books. And that's why I'm having a lot of fun bouncing back and forth, because it is, you know, I do get to have two books out, or well, three or four, technically, and I'll hopefully have four books out in 3.5 years,
Yeah.
and that's how long it's going to take to make the second movie, like, which is wild to me. But it's just all different formats and different processes and different people, and that's all exciting, because it's all in the name of creating and trying to do some cool magic, be it movie or book. And so it's all, so easiest is not
Yeah.
the word, but I will say, books are a more singular vision in a
Yes.
more singular experience, whereas, you're signing up for movies, you're signing up for the group project, and you're signing up for a lot of things. So
Do you, as a screenwriter and someone who works in the film industry, do you think that, like, so for example, 8114 being in front of these eyes, people reading it, people liking it, so on
mhm,
and so forth,
mhm.
that selling it and making it into a movie, this is an opportunity for people to read, like the people, the masses, to see what it's like and like this thing and help push that potentially into a movie at some point than just trying to sell a
I,
script, a spec script to someone.
yeah, I think so. So there's already been math, like multiple companies
Yeah.
have already inquired about the rights. So it's looking like that could be a possibility. I'm
Yeah.
I'm hopeful, but I think that this is such a it's in 8114 in particular, because as you've read it,
Yeah.
there's some really dark stuff in there.
Yes.
This is not a it's not a fun movie. It's not, I wouldn't even say it's Glorious has some dark stuff, but this is some really dark stuff, and
Yeah.
some stuff that I think is not going to be for audiences. Now, I know there are people that have non horror readers have, for some odd reason, decided that they were going to read 8114,
Yeah.
and who have never read a horror book
Yeah.
before. I've noticed this on NetGalley, which is really funny. And I'm like, you chose this one to be
This
your
book is
first
this how
one.
you started.
That's really wild
I've
to me.
never seen a horror movie before. I'm gonna watch
Yeah,
Terrifier
yeah,
and just
yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, right. And it's wild to me, but they ended up loving it, and really, and so I think there are more people in the book world that will give a chance, will give a shot, right,
Mhm.
to something horrific. Whereas if you watch a trailer for
Yeah.
8114, you're gonna be like, oh, I'm out,
I'm out.
and
Which was me
so
6 or 7 years ago. I'll tell you that right now. It's
yeah,
what it is.
yeah,
Like, I would
yeah.
skip over the horror genre in film. Like, it wouldn't be my thing.
Right, right, right. And so so I don't think it's going to make it easier. I don't think it's an accessible movie to the wide
Yeah.
public. And I just think that, but that's horror in general. Is I think that I I would say the same thing for Mouth.
Yeah.
I think Mouth is too weird and would be way too weird, and it would definitely be like an indie level movie. Um, that would only, it would be released on a small scale, and it would be so weird for a lot of people, because they'd be like, I'm not watching a movie about a mouth in the ground. That's a weird, that's not accessible. So
Yeah.
they're both kind of their own thing, that I don't know how they would translate to screen, and how that would look. But I do think 8114 would have more eyes, just because it is such a
Yes.
more accessible, regardless of how horrific some of the stuff in there is, palette, if you will. And
Mm.
but I don't think that's going to make it any easier for them to get to that point, or
Yeah.
for the audience to find them.
But I think, I mean, personally, if I saw 8114 as a trailer and hadn't read the book, then it's maybe a little bit different than someone who's a fan of the book, because you actually know what you're getting
Sure,
into. It's
sure,
the same.
sure.
You mentioned Eric LaRocca. You mentioned their
Yeah,
stuff. Like, it's the same thing. I feel like if you saw a trailer for one of their
yeah,
books, you'd be
yeah,
like, "What
yeah,
the fuck?" And then
yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah.
the material, that it's a little different. I think that I don't know. I will say that, Terrifier isn't the end all be all for horror movies for people, but I do think that it opened up some floodgates for some people to kind of like push the boundaries of things and actually want to see these films, because I feel like it's again, it's not the perfect films, they're not the most amazing films in the
Oh
world, they're
yeah, I
great,
listen.
but I think that it did open up the possibility of people being more willing to take a risk on things they may have either grossed out about or just terrified
Or
about in
been
general.
been trepidate. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Terrifier is a perfect example. I'm not a I Those movies are not made for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, they but they do and have done incredible things for the horror genre.
Yeah.
And they have opened so many doors and eyes to so many people in the horror genre. And that's worth celebrating like every single day. It's funny because I am working on one of the film projects I'm working on right now is actually an adaptation of Anybody Home by Michael Seilinger. I don't know if you read that one, but that is, a home invasion thing that is really brutal and really the film version is not going to be as it's going to be a different thing.
Yeah.
But in that script, we actually, I reference the good that Terrifier has done for like it's commentary on the horror genre, and in that script I talk about how what Terrifier has done
Mhm.
for horror audience and making horror fans a little more open to what they're willing to watch and the general public, and I think that's expanding a lot just in general with, look at the Monkey that's coming out.
Yeah.
That is going to be a batshit crazy movie and it's going to probably make a lot of money because and you wouldn't be well because of Stephen
Stephen
King's
King, but yeah.
name, but because mostly because
Yeah.
it looks fucking awesome.
Yes.
And and I think you're seeing this new sort of approach to horror
Yeah.
where people are giving things a chance that they would maybe not have given a chance 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. And I think that's exciting for it's exciting for all the filmmakers, screenwriters, it's exciting for all the authors who have these wild ass books that can now be adapted into things that would not have been safe, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. And so yeah,
And let's
it's
be honest,
exciting.
most horror movies are fairly cheaper to make
Mm-hmm.
than other movies too. So like the
Yep.
studios are probably like, oh hell yeah, this is also pretty
Yep.
nice because we can make a movie
Yep.
for like 60,000 or 60 million and
Yeah.
not have to
Yeah.
worry
Yeah.
about big things. And so and then things like Shudder, obviously that's huge. I think for
Yep.
the horror
Yep.
industry,
Yep.
horror genre films as
Screenbox is
well.
great.
Yes,
I
exact
mean, all
Screenbox,
these,
yeah,
yeah,
same thing.
all
Those
these
those
places.
places for
Yep.
their homes for these things, and people can watch. It's funny because Terrifier to me never really was that movie that I would even put on. Like I mentioned, 5 or 6 years ago, I
Right.
wasn't really into these
Right.
things, and so
Right.
if you add this in, I was lucky enough. My buddies own a convention, and they were bringing in David Howard Thornton, and they were
Oh,
bringing
that's
in
cool.
Damon Leone to this convention. So I also work for a brewery, and so I do
Awesome.
graphic design for the brewery. So we did a beer called Terrify IPA for
Oh,
the
cool.
convention, and so that was. And then I was like, well, I got
That's
to watch
funny.
these movies and so on and so forth,
Yeah. Yeah.
and getting to meet the guys, and David Howard Thornton out of his mask, out of his makeup, looks like he works at an Enterprise rent a car. So that's
Yeah. Yep.
awesome.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so all that's too. But again, it opened it up to me watching the third movie with a completely different eye than I did
Yeah.
with the first movie because it was like I want to see the actual filmmaking in this and
Yep.
not
Yep.
just being grossed out. And I think that it gets good publicity. People fainting in the movie
Sure.
theater.
Sure.
I'm
Sure.
always like, yeah,
Yep.
you didn't see that they also didn't take their medicine that day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
these
You
things
don't
like, oh,
see. You
someone
know.
threw up in the movie. I'm like, you mean because they had 17 beers before they went to the movie
Yeah.
theater? That
Yeah.
or they had the
Yeah.
flu? You didn't think about that?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But no,
But it's all
it's
exciting. It's all
yeah,
headlines
and it
and it's all
helps
exciting.
all
Yep.
publicity on is good publicity on
Yep.
that side of things,
Yep.
and so yeah, so I could see 8114 being that, and that not obviously it's nothing
Yeah.
close to that scale of like
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
gross people
Yeah.
out.
But I mean,
Um,
there's shocking things in there, and
but I
I
think that
think
like it's also I think part of it is when I went and saw Paranormal Activity for the first time. So that was
mhm.
one film that I did see in the theaters. My ex girlfriend at the time really wanted to go see it, so we saw it, and that scared the shit out of me. I mean, I was backing
Yeah.
up in the movie theater parking lot, and like people would walk
Yeah.
behind me, and I'd be like, "What the fuck is?" Like that kind of stuff. And up until the end of that movie, the edited the end of the original movie, and I thought that it changed a little bit of the movie. But the
Sure.
whole movie,
Sure.
I'm like, this could be real. Like in my mind,
Yeah.
I'm going, this is actually security camera footage from this person's house.
hmm
Like this is 100%
hmm
real. There's no fiction in this at all, and so on and so forth. Until again, to the end. If you haven't seen it, first of all, screw you because
Oh
it's
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
But
Yeah. 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 It
yeah,
goes back
they
to
changed the
Spielberg.
ending a little
Who's
bit
yeah.
where
Yeah. Yeah.
so it jumps at the screen. It just it ruined it for
Yeah.
me in
Yeah.
my opinion. But uh, the realness and the borderline between fiction and nonfiction, I think, is what does so well in 8114. I think
Yep.
that to me would
Oh,
sell it
thank you.
in general as a book. People should read that because, like I said, reading this with a couple of small changes, it could be a nonfiction book, like you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
then the
Yep.
opposite, pushing the boundaries of that. I think that to me, when you're reading a book and going, some of these things really happened, is pretty
Yeah.
screwed up. So I think that's huge in my opinion. I think that's what probably
Yeah.
sells the book
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. It's phenomenal in my opinion. So, and again, 218 pages is so accessible. Like to me, I'm
Yeah,
like, I don't know
yeah,
how to and nothing's missing. I think that's you mentioned how you kind of cut a middle section out of the book that it could have been longer. This is not like you were Clash was like, hey, you got to be under 225 pages, and you
yeah,
cut
yeah.
things
No,
out. Like it was written in a way that if you didn't know, you were just going potentially doing a longer version of it.
yeah.
Maybe
And I do,
maybe at
and
the
I
10th
do.
anniversary, you add the director's
Yeah, yeah,
cut,
yeah.
and you have like
You
the
know what's funny? You know what's funny is we had actually talked about that because somebody read it and they were like, we would love to see like picture. It was a really fun idea, and I was like, oh, that's a good idea to do
yeah,
like 8114, the director's cut that has
yeah,
like annotations and all that stuff. And but like it's funny because when I did turn in the book, they were like, this is really tight and like very in that again, that's where my screenwriting has helped is because I really I do write very tight and very like I want to get the story done. I don't want to fluff, but I also it's very much structure and very like it's that that 100-page mark on
yeah,
screenplays where I can know like okay you're essentially doing a three act structure for 8114
yeah.
and if each act is this so it's very I do very much believe in just tell the story you have to tell don't fill in a bunch of stuff that you don't have to because I don't think every story needs that and I don't
Yeah.
especially this one I think it was very important to get in and get out as quick as possible
So
mostly
you
because
have,
that house scares the shit out of me but
yeah. Well, yeah, dude, I don't even know, man. Like, I just like trying to think of like being you, and like, I don't know. I just like I've luckily the best thing about this too is like I guess I don't know if I wrote this in the review or not, but like I live in a house that's it was 6 years old. I live in a townhouse.
yeah
I rent a
yeah
townhouse, and I literally moved into this place. All my shit got moved into the garage because they were not done like sealing the tile in
oh
the living
wow
room
okay
area. Like it was like
wow
that close to being
that
done.
that new yeah
Yeah,
yeah
and that
yeah
new. So to me, I'm like, unless I'm on an Indian burial ground, where there's
yeah
gonna be
yeah yeah yeah
poltergeist
yeah
here,
yep
I
yep
don't think that there's many,
you're gonna experience that yeah yeah
experience
yeah
things here.
yeah yep
Now,
yep
6 years later, when I have a friggin' 9 months old, a 10-month old daughter, the floor creaks way too much. I don't know what the hell this. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, it was like
it just yeah
I had
well
my second child, and it was like the whole house is gonna make noise and wake everybody up. No, but I never really lived in that old of a house or that house that
yeah yeah
has that
yeah
history to it. And so to me, it's like I'm glad I read this book here. Honestly, if I read this
you're
book in
right
like a
right right
1800s farmhouse, I would have been
yeah
like, "Yep, nope." Pull the fuck out of
terrified
here. I'm
yeah
not
yeah
doing
yeah
this right
yeah
now.
yeah
And so like experiencing that and being able to tell this story in a way that you were able to take some liberties with, but also like tell this story so people could hear it. It's pretty badass in my opinion. I feel like
thank you
I can see in you and hear in you the excitement of actually having people read this and so on and so forth. Now you
yeah
have to
yeah
wait from this point we're talking now. This is coming out February 5th. You have to wait
yeah
6 months before other people
yeah
get to read it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's exciting because right, like this is now the buildup. We got to
Yeah.
start building it up, and I got to start. We have some fun ideas, and I have some fun plans. I mean, again, that house is 3 minutes away from where I live now, so I'm gonna, there'll be some exciting, maybe some walkthroughs, some video walkthroughs and stuff. Just kind of lead, and it'll be
Yeah.
some neat stuff, and it's just really it's been exciting to see the excitement and the reaction so far, and just like kind of it's going to be a fun 6 month wait
Yeah,
for
you're
sure.
in it now. Like this is the year.
In
You're
it,
in
in it,
release year.
in
This
it. We're
publication
in it.
year is
We're in it.
here.
Yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah,
in it,
yeah.
and this
We're
is pretty
here.
cool on that. And so that comes out August 26th in
26.
2025 from Clash Books, which is awesome.
Yes.
I'm so excited for people to read this book. It's so phenomenal. It's so scary. It's emotional. There's like so much into it, and again, like being able
Yeah.
to talk to you and having this conversation is really cool. And I hope people enjoyed that as well. I can't wait to see another movie from you. I'm excited for
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
I'm excited for those that future of
We're
yours
we're
too.
working on them. A lot of
I'm
things.
glad
A
you're
lot of
not
things in the
separating.
works.
I'm glad you're not retiring from screenwriting to write novels.
No,
Like,
no, no,
because
no, no. That's my number one. That's always my number one. Film, and screenwriting will always be. It's just it's what we talked about.
yeah,
That stuff takes so long. And then
yes,
you couple that with the strikes, and you couple that with
yeah,
everything else that's been going on. It's just, it's there are things happening and things coming, and hopefully it'll be a busy
yeah.
year and next year,
And
so
I'm guessing this is true for at least a lot of people that have talked about it. It's like also like having different avenues to write these stories also keeps your mind fresh on the different stories too. I think that's
yeah,
a
yeah,
if you just strictly spent time on screenwriting and had no other kind of like output to do these things,
yeah.
I'm guessing things would get clogged up or again,
Well, and
uh,
I think yeah, that's coming off of Glorious. It was like
yeah,
I got stuck in this little. Everybody wanted something weird from me, and I was like,
yeah,
oh, okay, yeah, like I'm really not that weird. I am weird, but like I'm not like the weird
not
guy,
what you're expecting me to
And
be weird about. Yeah, I know.
yeah, I'm like and so and then Mouth was kind of still weird like
Yeah,
that, but it's in 8114. I think has really shown I'm not the weird. You don't
yeah,
have to be the weird whole guy, right? And like and there's more projects that are like okay, it's I'm writing a lot of different genres and a lot of different things that like you said, it really is nice not to just be stuck in one aspect of
yes.
storytelling or genre or things like that. It does really open the mind. It really does help the creativity.
I tell you right now, it's not that easy. It's not like as simple as a you want to just do it, let's do it. But I would be down for someone who also reads a lot of comic books, having you be the writer behind a nice horror series, mini series of comic
I
books.
would
I would
love
be
to.
down
I
for
would
that
love.
too. You
Yeah.
know, because that's obviously I
I
think
we
that's all. I would feel like that's closer to screenwriting than it is than
yeah. It
screenwriting is to
definitely
writing
is.
prose novels. I
I'm
think that there is that visual aspect of it too, and working with someone who has a visual eye, like an artist and stuff.
Yeah. I've done a little bit of comic writing. Nothing. Nothing. I want to. I really have thrown it out there that I would love to do comic book writing. I after Glorious, we got when they launched the DC horror imprint when
Yep.
they were doing like the Black Label stuff. We got to I was lucky enough to pitch a few things their way. They didn't go anywhere, but it
Yeah.
was a lot of fun to pitch some cool things like that, and it was really exciting just to think about. And I just love comics. Like
Yeah.
I'm a big comic fan. I mean, I'm one of my projects that I'm working on right now. It's my dream project that I've spent like 15 years pursuing that is going to happen, and it's a dark horse thing, and we're working on that, and so I just love comics. I love film. I love it all, and so yes, I would love to do more comic stuff
And you said,
for
like I
sure.
said, it's one of those things where I'm like, I want to see it, so it's just gonna have like
Yeah,
obviously it's
yeah,
not that
I would
simple,
love
and
to
you
do
know
it.
that too. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
it takes a sometimes a chance meeting or
yep,
something along those lines that afterwards and working on this project could lead to something in the future too. Because I know for a fact that Dark Horse has some phenomenal horror
yeah.
titles
Yeah, that's I mean
on
that's
their
that
yeah
Rebecca's series is with them. So
yeah
it's like
yeah.
yeah, I would love to do that. So,
That's awesome. But 8114, August 26th, 2025, Clash Books. I'm so pumped about it. Pre-order that. I'll say it over and over and over again. I don't think people understand how much pre-orders mean. And
yeah,
I will say that there's a bunch of places. I know, for an example, like if you order on Amazon or anything like that, you don't actually get charged until the book ships. So like it's
right,
not any different. It doesn't hurt your bank
right,
account. It doesn't hurt you at all. Just order it and
right.
tell
Until you
Amazon
forget
you
about
want
it, and
it.
you're like, oh shit, I forgot.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
And same thing
yeah,
with, if it ever gets into an audiobook, which would be kind of cool too. Same thing with those is
yeah,
you can
yep,
pre-order those nowadays too. I don't know what the
yep.
plan is on that, but I think that
Discussing. It's in
that'd be kind of
discussions.
cool.
Yep,
So,
yep.
yeah, and bookshop.org is obviously a huge thing for
Mm-hmm.
us because that supports local bookstores and check with your local bookstores. But again, I'm going to reiterate this for anybody who's ever listened to the podcast. If it's between not buying it and buying it on Amazon, buy it on Amazon. That's my
Yeah,
whole thing.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
don't support a huge mega corporation, but in the same sense, if you're choosing between buying it or not buying it, it still helps Joshua here
It's
and it
still a
helps
pre-order. Yeah,
Clash.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
still
Yep,
helps all that stuff. So just do it
yep,
and get it over with because I think it's really worth it in that sense. And if anybody wants to watch Glorious because it's phenomenal.
yep.
Just don't
Thank you.
watch Glorious and read Rest Stop back to back. I just feel like at that point it's just too
Or
much.
do, or
Or
do,
two.
or do.
And Nat's like, wait a second.
Yeah,
Buy my
it's,
book.
yeah,
What the hell
yeah,
are you
yeah,
talking about
yeah,
now?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I do think you guys would be awesome. You guys like do a tour, a little like con tour where you guys sit at a table
I
together and just sign toilet
I
seats
got to
and
meet him. Yeah, I got to meet him for the first time in person back in September, and it was
yeah,
awesome. It was great.
yeah. Nat's
And then
awesome.
yeah, he's wonderful.
He's also weird, but in a good way.
Stoked for his new one. Yeah, I think
Yes.
it's gonna be awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
dude, I just read it. It is
Oh yeah, yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
God, it's phenomenal.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
coming out here pretty soon too. But yeah,
Cool.
maybe curl up the film on Friday February 14th. Watch Glorious with your significant other. I think it's no,
Yeah,
you
it's a
don't think
great.
so? You don't
It's a
think?
love story. It's a love story. It's a love story. Yeah. Yeah,
Not,
fill,
not, what
it'll
you're,
fill
not, I don't
the
think that's
void.
what your wife or your
Yeah,
different others
yeah,
picturing,
yeah,
but yeah.
It'll
But yeah,
fill the
awesome.
void in your relationship.
Yes,
so,
that's fucking
yeah. So,
I do
cool.
appreciate you coming on and chatting and taking
Thank
the
you.
time out of your day to discuss your books, horror, movies, all that stuff right here on the podcast. We'll have you back at some point in the future for sure. Keep us on your radar for anything you want to talk about in the future. But yeah, good luck with publication in a couple of months, and I'm hoping things are great 2025 for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Appreciate it.